strategies and concepts discussed are for educational purposes only and do not represent specific investment, tax, or estate planning advice. Investing carries an inherent element of risk, and it is in everyone's best interest to consult a tax, legal, or investment professional. Beth Williams is an investment advisor representative of, and advisory services are offered through USA Financial Securities Corp., a registered investment advisor. Megan Carney, Megan S. Carney PLLC, and Financial Arc Builders are not affiliated with USA Financial Securities Corp.
Welcome to Money Healing. I'm your co-host, Beth Williams.
And I'm your other co-host, Megan Carney. We're here to talk about money and our feelings related to it. I'm a psychologist who specializes in helping sensitive people.
And I'm a financial planner. We both talk to everyday people just like you about these topics.
Everyone's mental health and money health journeys are so different. And as unique as we all are, there are some common themes when it comes to how our emotions impact our money and vice versa.
And it's those common themes that we are going to be discussing together, both the themes themselves and some ideas from us about how to move forward and heal your relationship with money. In the next bit of episodes, Megan and I will be unpacking the various emotions and trauma themes that we've encountered within our observations over the last few years.
We discovered that people fell into one of two camps, one that knows their numbers and where they are financially, and those that don't know their numbers and where they are financially. We recommend that you go through the episodes and listen to the ones you believe may apply to you.
Megan and I are big advocates for getting collaborative support for both your mental health and your financial health journey. As you listen, we recommend that you pay attention to yourself, your reactions emotionally, and reach out to either a mental health professional and or a financial professional to help you deal with your relationship with money.
We'll begin by discussing I don't know my numbers and blank. Is there something that comes after that? Emotional themes we'll discuss within that will be fear, avoidance, what happens if I lose or fail, shame, guilt, and even domestic violence and abuse with the overarching theme of trauma.
We will then discuss I know my numbers and blank. Some of the emotional themes that we'll discuss within that will be hopelessness, fear, shame, embarrassment, burnout, never enough, feeling lost, undervalued, worry, and then we'll also deal with the overarching theme of trauma.
Hi, welcome to this next episode of Money Healing. We are getting into a really deep and really important topic today, and that relates to domestic abuse. And specifically, we're talking about financial abuse today. We wanted to do this early because it is so important and because it really is helpful to know when you're experiencing it, or if you're having inklings of something doesn't feel right here. We're going to give you some examples and some things to point you in that direction of, yes, these are red flags, and help you figure out some strategies to help move out of that or away from that. We're going to start today just diving right in with Beth and her story.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we talked about this early on, I was like, I totally volunteer to have this conversation because, like you and I have talked about, domestic violence can happen to anyone, and it is not a gender-specific issue. It's not just something that happens to women. It's not something that just happens to smaller women physically either. And I mean, it happens in transgender groups. It happens with men. So it happens to anyone at all. And I want it to be, I think both of us want it to be more of an open dialogue with other people. So for the sake of honesty and transparency, which you and I both really believe in, we just thought that we'd tell that story. So for me, I touched on this a bit in a previous episode, and that was that I was ever so briefly married before, and it eventually ended up turning into a domestic violence issue. Very long story short, and I will stick to the financial facts specifically, was that he was getting more abusive every time that I would come home from work, and he was yelling at me for God knows what, and fighting me at every turn, and getting really stalkerish about like my friends and stuff. And he had been really unhappy with his job and started drinking. And although it seemed to change him, it wasn't like I necessarily felt unsafe. I mean, he was just having a couple of bad years, right? And one night it escalated to the point that he raped me, and it was really terrifying. And I decided that I was going to leave for a week, and I was going to seek counsel, and I was going to try to figure out what I needed to do next. I have no idea if he even remembers any of this because he was drinking that night as well. But for me, my mom is a cop, and she had always said that the minute that you don't feel safe in a relationship, you leave. And I knew, even though I wasn't necessarily articulating at the time that that was rape, I probably would have said that it was just like rough sex or that he was having a bad time. But that was based off of my Christian upbringing, conservative Christian upbringing, that, you know, a wife is supposed to be submissive and that kind of thing. And so it took years of therapy to even just open up about the fact that that was what had happened. But I do remember my mom always saying, if you don't feel safe, you leave. And I knew, even though I didn't really understand what was going on or what had happened, I knew that I did not feel safe. So I left, and I was trying to get some, you know,
Can
counsel
I
and stuff.
pause you for just a moment? Like, I want to reiterate that fact that the safety feeling matters. It's not what you label what you experienced. It's not if you can tell yourself or say to somebody else that it was rape or sexual assault or physical violence. It doesn't matter if you can explain it away, right? Because they're having a bad day, a bad week, a bad month, a bad year, because of all the things that are going on in their life that are hard for them. If you don't feel safe, that is a huge red flag. And I'm so glad that you had your mom to reiterate that for you, that the moment you don't feel safe, you leave.
I definitely agree. And not everybody has that. As a domestic violence victim and survivor, I've talked with others that don't have or haven't had someone in their life to say, "Hey, yeah, you're completely right. If you don't feel safe, you need to leave." And you're right, it doesn't need to have a label on it, but yeah, so I fully intended for us just to, you know, figure out what we needed to do next, and then talk that through the week later. So I told him, you know, I need a week, I need to seek some counsel, I have people that I trust that I can go to and ask questions. And then I said we were going to meet, you know, back in a week at this place and at this time. And apparently that was not a reasonable request, because 32 hours into that week, he hunted me down, literally, with a bunch of his family. And this led to a police chase, and he went to jail, and several other people went to jail, and it took them a really long time to find him. And it was just insane. And they had threatened me enough to a point that the officers had to put me into a safe house, and I left my name behind and my identity, and I had to be put into this safe house until the issue was resolved. So coming out of this, I had no idea how much control he had and just how manipulative he was until we started to go through this process of getting divorced. And that was also quite easy to do, getting divorced, because he was in jail when he got served the papers. So at least I knew where he was. But anyways, it was really difficult. And I had never, you know, being raised conservative Christian, I had never been in another relationship. So I didn't have a lot of a good gauge about what was appropriate and what was not, especially financially. And when I was trying to, clear out my house and get into the safe house, and I had police escort and the whole thing, during that portion, we found out that he had wiped out all of our bank accounts. And through this process, I'm literally without anything. All of our cards had been turned off or maxed out. All of our cash was gone. And so I'm literally like without any understanding. And we had debt that I didn't know that we had. And I was very much in the dark over our finances. And that's one of the reasons that I'm such a huge advocate for getting financial advice, even if it's not that you are, needing advice for retirement or you're needing advice for something really specific. But just generally, I think that it's a really healthy thing to ask the other person that you're financially involved with of like, hey, do you mind bringing in a third person into this conversation? Because he was very much against that. And now professionally, I understand that that's a big red flag. And the little bit of training that we're given professionally around this issue is that if you're seeing that the other person's not willing to be in the conversation, or that you're trying to hide information from your financial advisor, that's usually a sign that there's something else going on. And when he and I had briefly broached the subject of bringing in a financial professional, he was very much opposed to it. So now that's definitely something that I try to encourage, is just bringing somebody in, even if it's just once a year and you want to have somebody just check in. It's a really big thing. So Megan, I'm very much here and alive and able to talk about this because of therapy and the beautiful people that have come alongside me. And I definitely am a huge advocate for getting a professional's perspective on this. Obviously, there's a bit of a difference, between being a financial advisor and being a therapist. And yet when it comes to this issue specifically, I guess I'm kind of curious, like, how do you know that you're even experiencing financial abuse?
I think it always comes back to power and control with any type of abuse, right? Physical, emotional, sexual, or financial. And so when we think about having power and control and financial abuse, that means the person who is doing the abusing has all the power over the money, has all the control over the finances. Some of the things that you were saying in your story were the red flags to me of, oh, this person has all the power and control over the finances. That red flag of not even being willing to talk to a financial advisor. And not just because of like shame, right? It sounded like that was probably a hard no. And the fact that you had, it seems like, zero knowledge. Maybe you didn't have the logins to the bank accounts. Maybe you didn't even know the account numbers. Maybe you weren't even listed on a lot of those accounts. Maybe he opened credit cards in your name without you knowing. When you don't have access or knowledge, that the money exists, that the cards exist, that the accounts exists, that's a big red flag. And sometimes it's not obvious that you don't know those cards or those accounts exist, because maybe there is one or two that you do know about. And so the red flag that you would see is like, there's all this spending that's going on that's not adding up, right? It's just not adding up. Where the heck is all of this money coming from? The other big red flag there is if they're just giving you like an allowance, or like you have one card that you are allowed to spend on, and there is a really strict limit on that card. Maybe it's only a debit card, and when it runs out, it runs out. And you really don't have any say in it. That's a big red flag. I think it's important to address too that it doesn't matter who's making the money. It's really easy to say like, well, it's their money, they earned it, it's from their job, so it makes sense that they should have control over it. And to an extent, yes. And you're in a partnership with a person, right? So if you're seeing all of these red flags, even if it is their money that they're bringing in, or you're assuming that it's their money that they're bringing in, because it might not be. It might be credit cards taken out in your name that you don't know about. You still get to say, hey, I want to have a better understanding of just what's going on with our money so that I am like spending and saving wisely. And if they have a really strong negative reaction to that, huge red flag, huge red flag, all right? It's all about the power and control. If you have no power, no control, no say, no access, then financial abuse is probably happening.
One of the things that we hear a lot in the industry and from the talking heads of the world is that if you're sharing a bed with someone, you should share their finances. And very much I guess an assumption that we're going to commingle everything. At least from my perspective, that was actually one of the reasons that we did have problems, was we didn't have anything separate. I didn't have any control outside of that, and it made it very difficult to leave. So I guess from a totally outside perspective, what do you think about that advice of you have to commingle everything?
Well, in general, I think anytime anyone says everyone has to do it this way, we're making some mistakes, because different approaches are better for different people and for good reason. And I don't think it has to be a one or the other either. It doesn't have to be we totally commingle everything or everything is separate. There can be some both and, right? And so when people are saying if you're sleeping in bed with a person, then your money should be sleeping with each other as well too, right? There's this underlying assumption of safety, of total trust. And what I know from my profession is that people stay in relationships that don't feel safe for a very, very long time, because it also doesn't feel safe to leave. So that hard line of you should commingle all your money, I don't necessarily buy into. And I actually think it's a really big red flag if you want to open your own account and your spouse is like, no, 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 don't do that. That is the worst thing you could possibly do. In my relationship, we both have separate accounts, and we have our joint accounts, and most of our credit cards are the same. I probably have one that I've forgotten about that's just in my name. I don't even know at this point. But there's no concern on either side about what either person is doing with their own accounts. Maybe one of us just really likes to surprise the other with gifts. This would be my spouse, right? Like, so sometimes the spending is coming from that account because he's like, I want this to be a total and complete surprise. And if she looks at any of our budgeting stuff that all our commingled things are with, it's not going to be a surprise anymore. It can also be because like one person has a really big goal to save something for themselves or for their business or whatever. And that's like the easy place to save that money without accidentally spending it as like, oh, we have all this money in our bank account, right? We're just putting it in a totally separate area for like, golf trip or girls trip or whatever we're saving up for. So I like the both and approach, obviously, because our relationship is safe enough, trusting enough that we can commingle really easily and we can have our own separate really easily. And that does make it safer if somebody wants to leave at any point, that you already have your own account over here and you can start socking, I don't know what that phrase is. You can start saving for yourself to get out if that's what you need to do.
So Megan, I guess the concept for us like going forward is, if you identify that there's financial abuse in your relationship and you're trying to figure out what to do next. I mean, from a financial standpoint, I would encourage people to understand that there's a time and a season for everything. And there's a time and a season to be spending, and there's a time and a season to be saving. And if it needs to be a time that you are spending to get out of a relationship, you might incur more debt than you had in your plan, but you need to do that if it's going to get you out. But from a psychological standpoint, what would you say would be your next best steps?
Yeah. The first step actually is, even before that, simply accepting that that is happening, right? It's really easy to be in denial about the fact that any type of abuse is happening to you, because we tend to think that those bad things like that are something that happens to other people and not us. But it happens to a lot of people, regardless of gender, sexuality, size, intelligence. It can happen to anybody and everybody. So I'm just accepting that that is where you are right now. And really just taking the right next step for you. Depending on what else is going on in that relationship, how physically safe you feel, you might immediately be trying to get out. And if you are unsafe and immediately trying to get out, I would recommend that you go and contact your local domestic violence shelter. There's also the National Domestic Violence Hotline. They have a website. They have a phone number that you can call or text. But I do recommend going to your local resource, because your local resource is going to be able to make a safety plan with you if you need it. They are going to be able to handle those big emotions that you are having. They are going to be able to do that while helping you figure out, like, okay, you need a burner phone in this situation, or we actually need to put you in a safe place. You can't go back home if you're in that type of situation where you've essentially just ran. They can have lots and lots of resources for you. And even if they don't have every single resource you need, they know locally who to connect with to get you as much as they possibly can. If you are safe, it might be a slower exit. That doesn't mean that you can't use those local resources. So even if you're doing that slow exit, I would still recommend going to your local resources to help you create a plan to get out, and to do that in a smart and safe way, because we really don't know when things are going to escalate. We have some ideas of when things are very likely to escalate, but we don't have a crystal ball. People like to think that in the mental health field, we can say, like, yep, that's going to happen. We do not have the ability to do that. I'm unfortunately or fortunately not psychic. So if you're getting out slowly, you might be opening up your own savings account and slowly saving, getting a job if you don't already have one, and putting some money away there quietly. Or you might be talking to family members or friends or other connections that you have to help you get out. So first steps are really practical steps while knowing that there are going to be big feelings. You are going to question it the whole time. You're going to question yourself the whole time, because typically in abusive situations, one of the strategies that keeps you there is what's called the cycle of abuse. And what happens in the cycle of abuse is it starts off really, really great. You're in the honeymoon phase and you feel like this person just could not possibly love you more. And what ends up happening is slowly tension starts to build until a bigger incident happens. There's like an explosion. And then they try to repair it really quickly and often in a big way. They might do love bombing, like buying you lots of gifts, presents, and just showering you with love and affection. But then the cycle goes back, right? The tension builds back up until something happens again. And there's an explosion of whatever type, physically, verbally, whatever. And then they make that repair. And you keep having that hope that things are going to get better, because there is always a good period. There's always a good chunk. And so you're stuck in this cycle because those good times probably are really, really good. And you probably can see why they might be acting that way sometimes when the tension is building, right? It's really easy to, if you're a sensitive person especially, to have compassion for that other person and understand why they're stressed, why they're yelling, why they're angry, all of that stuff. And so it's hard. It's really hard to get out without questioning yourself. So just know that like that is normal, that you are going to question yourself. But if you're experiencing abuse, if you don't have power, control of any sort, you don't have a say in your relationship, you're experiencing abuse. So it's really just about finding the support that you need, the friends who, maybe you've been cut off from, or family even that you've been distanced from. Chances are when you reach out, they're going to be there for you, right? They're going to, somewhere in the back of their minds, they had an inkling, right? And they just didn't say it, or they were too afraid to bring it up, or maybe they did bring it up and you weren't ready to hear it at that time. Those people who cared about you then still care about you now. And so it's important to find your support network to help you get through that first phase of getting out. And I would say it goes without saying, but it doesn't go without saying, getting a therapist too, while you're in that getting out phase, even if it's, somebody that you only want to work with temporarily. Maybe they're not your forever therapist, but they can help you get through this crisis type point. Get that therapist, get the help that you need and the support that you need to get yourself out.
We hope that you join us next time for our next episode. We'll be talking about I know my numbers and I don't get financial help. And specifically, we'll be talking about I have too much debt, or I feel like I have too much debt. We'll see you then.